Hey, have you ever lost someone you really loved? It sucks, man. Let me tell you about my uncle. He looked just like John Witherspoon, but with a wonky eye.
Look, man, when I tell you that eye was to the full, I mean, both of those eyes was wonky, bro. Like he would, one eye looked this way, the other eye looked that way. It was wonky, man. He would say Ruba all the time. You know what I mean, Ruba? And but then that was my uncle, man. We was tight.
He was a mechanic but couldn't fix cars, and he'd always wear overalls.
Like, like, like I'd never seen him in anything other than overalls. But he was a mechanic, but he never fixed cars. Like it was, like yeah, he was, yeah, man. And he had he had some fancy overalls, and I think I have some of the pictures that show some of my uncle. But he even that wonky eye he had, it was from my grandfather. He beat the crap out of him all the time. From what my mom would tell me, and that's what made his eyes cross. But I don't want to keep. I want to keep this light, as light as I can, for at least a little while.
Even fancy silk ones for special occasions. He was a Vietnam vet and a crazy strong dude. He used to drive my dad around with
Yeah, he was Vietnam vet, man. Like crazy, you know, honest, sweetheart. You know, I'd be on the phone with this guy legitimately 8 to 10 hours a day some days. Especially he died when I was 21, but 8 to 10 hours a day. You know, from 19 till he passed.
see firsthand the violence that my father produced and tell me stories about him. We'd talk for hours and
Yeah, he was the one that taught me about my father. Everybody else kind of tried to paint a negative picture of him, and he kind of told the truth from both angles. Um, you know, and so that's what for me it was at least a more of an honest side of it, because of the people that did talk about my father talked about how he either didn't do what he said he was doing, or he just blatantly robbed people and stuff like that.
hours, sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day. My cousin went to prison for 15 years, so all my uncle's energy went.
So my uncle's name is Jimmy, and his son was Jimmy June. So um, yeah, Jimmy June went to jail when I was 10. I didn't see him again until I was 25. He didn't even get to bury his father.
To me. His daughter had 3 girls who I was super close with. I loved having them as my family. It was my only peace during that
Yeah, they never. I told them about what my mom was doing. They didn't believe me, you know, and not even in a bad way. It was just like they wouldn't believe that my mom would do stuff like that. So they just she just brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. It was just like that's what family go through, you know. So, but they were my little outlet, you know. It was, yeah,
time.
for a while anyway.
We'd play Monopoly and Uno, but I never let them when they had to know who was the boss.
Plain and simple, baby. You know, you get no free turns around here. I don't care if I'm 25, 20. Well, I wasn't 25. I was 22. That was the last time I saw him. But I don't care if you 6, 7, or 8. You ain't getting no free rides around here. You know, you ain't getting no free rides.
My cousin was adopted, but I didn't even know until after my uncle died. His
When I say I literally had no idea that we weren't related. I did not find out until a year and a half, 2 years after my uncle passed. Had no idea. My uncle never talked about it. My mom never talked about it. I didn't even know. I didn't even think my sister knew. My sister knew, and she never even talked about it. We never talked about it, but they used it against us behind our back. We would give them our hand me downs, and I would tell them, oh, we would be like, we don't want it, but you don't have to take it if we don't want it. Like you don't have to. And but my mom was just trying to like whatever she could do to help. You know what I mean? And but they took it like it was some type of charity case, but it wasn't. It was just a reason for us to be around them, you know. And then there was just this fallout after my uncle passed, and the oldest girl, she wouldn't even come out the room when I came over to visit anymore. You know, it would. And I mean, mind you, I'd be there. I would go there maybe once a week at one point, and they wouldn't even go out the room. She wouldn't even go out the room to come see me anymore. I'd have to go in the room to come see her, and she would pretend to be nice, but I never even understood what switched, because they would come over to our house once a month, and my sister would watch them, and then that just stopped.
Family never talked about it. When my uncle passed, I lost my connection to them too. They stopped talking to us and it broke my heart. I missed out on seeing them grow up and going to their birthdays. I needed them more than they knew. Man, when my uncle died, my sis and I were massive Tupac fans, like, hardcore.
So when I say Tupac fans, like for real, for real.
We even tried to solve his murder like some Harriet the Spy shit.
So it was more me trying to solve this murder. Like I was legitimately like putting. I had a whole little not vision board, but like the crime vision boards or whatever you want to call it, for lack of a better word. Had the boards on there trying to figure out who was who, what was what. At this time, who could have did this, and I'll save my ideas for another video. But you know, there's a lot of stuff around, especially moving to LA and actually finding out some of the stuff that they did to share, you know, that the mainstream media never shared about.
We were a Tupac family, repping KC like we were from Cali. Crazy thing.
Now, if you from Midwest, especially certain parts of like the middle of the Midwest, like Kansas City, nobody claimed to be from Kansas City. Everybody wanted to be someplace else. So it was Kansas City loved to call itself Little Cali at that time, and I don't know if they still do now. I haven't been back in 10 years, but yeah, it was big time. We consider ourselves California, a Midwest California.
Is, both Tupac and my uncle died on September 13th, 9 years.
So that was literally the same day, not the same year, but same day that Tupac died, that my uncle died. And I was at that point, I was looking for a sign, man, because what was going on in my house, and then all the stuff that had happened up until that point. And I'll tell you the regret for me was that I stopped talking to my uncle. It was maybe 2 weeks into when I stopped talking to my uncle. I had joined the MLM and I was trying to start my own business and all that stuff. And I asked him to join with me. He was like, "Well, it's not a good idea for you to do," and all this stuff. And I just felt like I didn't need him, So I think for about 2 weeks, I didn't talk to him. And mind you, I was probably talking to him at least twice a week or once a week, 8 hours a day. We were talking on the phone for 8 hours straight. So I stopped talking to him. So I always kind of blame myself for that, at least at the very beginning of it. But that's almost 20 years ago now.
Apart. I remember praying for a sign from God about my path right before my uncle passed, and I guess that was it. We had a small fight the week before he died, and I thought I didn't need him anymore. But when he passed, I took it hard. I forgot what he even looked like.
I forgot what my uncle looked like for maybe 4 years. That's how um, distraught I was. And I couldn't even look at a picture, and even if I looked at a picture, I forgot the picture. Like it's just crazy what the mind will cut off. But yeah, I didn't even, yeah, and that aided to it because he was the only person I could talk to that he didn't believe me either, but he believed me, but he didn't believe me to the extent. And I remind you, I didn't figure that out, figure out what they were really doing until maybe 8 years later, 6 years later. I just thought it was just something I could fix, you know.
Like, man, I loved my uncle. Before he died, he knew I always wanted to meet the other side of my family. We didn't even know how to get in touch with my.
This was a crucial side. So my last name is Reed, and my father's last name is Reed, and I'm a junior, but I never read the Reed side of my family. My mom is Montgomery. My uncle is Jimmy Montgomery, and we had the Montgomery side of the family. So uh, I never met a Reed for since birth. And we lived at the same house for 17 years. Well, for them longer than that. That was the house that my grandma lived in, and then my mom took it over when she died, and then, all that stuff. So we've had that house for 50, 60 years. Um, but yeah, they never came by. none of that stuff. So um, it couldn't have been a week before he passed. It couldn't have been a week or 2 weeks before he passed, and he called me. He was like, you still want to meet the Reed side?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've been waiting to hear from them for years." Come to find out, they couldn't have been 10 blocks away for 20 years. Never knew that.
My dad's side of the family. I had never even met half of my family or seen a picture of my dad before then. But they
My mom kept pictures from me. She didn't want me to see a picture of my father. She kept pictures from me. So I didn't see the first picture until I was 19 or 20 years old of my father.
reached out after my uncle's passing, and even though my mom and sis didn't want to see them, I was eager to meet them.
Yeah, my mom and my sister never saw him. They didn't want to see him, and I kind of understand. I don't blame them because when he died, nobody was there. Nobody. It was just us.
They left us right after my father was killed. It took them 21 years to come around. When I finally met them, they were in tears. My uncle's death was like opening.
My I can't remember. I can't. She wasn't my grand. She was my auntie. That girl bawled her eyes out when she saw me. You look just like your daddy, and it was good to see him. And I mean, we don't really talk now, but it was at least good to meet some of them. I think some of them it would be nice to meet them again.
A door that I never knew existed. I was able to spend time and meet cousins, aunts, uncles, and people I never got a chance to meet. But it was really hard. The day my uncle died was insane. My sister asked me when was the last time I talked to him, and it had been weeks at that point. I broke down out of guilt. We rushed over to his house, which was the same.
So so we were living about 30 miles away from where we grew up, right? Um, I drive my sister's car probably 100 miles an hour. I get down there in about 8 minutes. Like I'm flying, but I almost crashed that car probably 6 times. Um, Found out that he passed, and yeah, I lost it. Especially just that 21-year-old kid, man. And yeah,
One I grew up in. He was living there and I got there just in time before they took his body out. Wouldn't let me see him. His face had melted and his scalp
yeah, like literally. When we had, I had to, I was the only man there when he passed, so I'm the one that has to go in there and check to see if there's any belongings. So I go in there and check, and the first thing I see is his hair on the ground. You know, the top of his head on the ground, the skin had fell off. You know, um, so obviously it was so hot, his face had melted off his body. So, and then there was just a puddle of blood. It wasn't like the blood, like thick blood you see, like the corn syrup blood. It was more like it looked like the water. It had split up into water and blood. If you've ever seen it like that before.
was on the floor. From the summer heat. Blood and fluids everywhere, even bending the wood in our living room floor.
I mean, and of course he pooped himself or whatever. Like I think that was probably, hopefully it was after the fact. If he doodled himself before, it is what it is.
My uncle Jimmy was prideful, he had heart problems, and no one
So he had open heart surgery the week before and didn't tell anybody. So right after he got out, they I guess discharged him from the hospital. We live about 4 blocks away from the VA where I grew up at. We live about 4 blocks from the VA, and it's a steep hill. It's a good 45-degree angle, steep hill to walk up. So he got discharged from the hospital, walked his stupid ass up that hill right after he just had open heart surgery, and then he went home, went to lay down, and then I guess he died from that.
knew. He had open heart surgery a week before he passed and walked home directly after the surgery. And get
And the only reason I know that was because Adi my cousin called me and told me that he was going to the hospital and he was making it seem like it was just nothing. Like he was getting a wart removed or something, you know what I'm saying? So we were like, okay. He was like, no need to come, boo, 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 boo. All right, you're getting a wart removed. I'll come there if you need me, And Like, yeah, that was the last time I saw. That was the last time, you know.
This, it rained for about 5 minutes in the middle of summer right.
So this, it's. I've always had supernatural things happen. Always. You know, I can't tell you if it's from the dark side or from the light side, but it's always been supernatural stuff around me and my family. Always stuff that you just can't logically explain. So, like dead ass, um, middle of the summer, it's in Missouri, which it never rains in the summer. Um, it rained over our house. I was um, drenched in water for a few minutes, and then it dried out. It rained for about 5 or 6 minutes.
Over our house when he died. I've had so many coincidences in my life. So my spiritual birthday was the same day my uncle died. Years later, September 13th is when I left to Cali.
So when I left to Cali, it was I bought the ticket September 13th that morning, and then that night I left. I packed up a couple of bags and I left. You know, so and then that's been my spiritual calendar day.
Every year around that time, I get some new understanding or wisdom. It was like
I would prefer to call it a download. You know, I get some kind of download, a new level download. You know, even if it's me backpedaling something to erase so I can move forward, or it's me learning something. But it's always via osmosis. It's like it's some downloading something from the stars or something.
clockwork. I believe that each person has a specific date that symbolizes their personal.
I truly do, and I think most of us don't know our spiritual dates. You know, I know we know our birth dates, but there's something that breaks us in a certain way that gives us our spiritual dates. You know, where we tend to learn and grow on a different level and learn something very new for our spirit. You know, and then we go to our next level in this life.
Breakthrough. For me, that is the date. Losing my uncle was tough. I wasn't the same happy go lucky kid anymore. I was alone and had nothing, and even though everyone.
I was a class clown and a comedian. I was actually going to be a comedian before I was going to be an actor. Then I became a singer. I was goofy, man. I still am, but it's very intimate for me to be goofy around somebody because most people take it as a weakness or an insecurity, So I'm not goofy anymore.
Looked up to me, my mom wanted me gone. I cried for years. But like Forrest Gump said, that's all I gotta say about that. Okay, so now. I don't really know how to say this or whatever, but basically I want to show you the.
Simply put, um, I took the long way. Uh, I burned my Bible. I want to say September 2011, maybe a little earlier than that. It was right after I was baptized. I just said I wanted to know the truth. So I studied virtually every religion on this planet, every main religion, and I've studied. It'll go further, and you'll find out what I mean.
Spirit world from a logical, methodological, and reasoning perspective. Back in 2012, I gave up Christianity and burned my Bible in my backyard, and asked God for the truth. My family has always been into supernatural stuff. My mom was really into it when I was a.
So when I say that, I mean we was like on some Constantine type stuff. Um, my mom had a level of intuition that you just couldn't that nobody really could wrap around, and it was like she gave it up. And as weird as it sounds, when like Lifetime new movie network came out, and when because women were really been abused at one point, not the stuff that they're pretending to be now. I'm talking about some of them, but we would watch these shows of women being beat to death and all this stuff, and then it changed her. Um, I went from being her son to being like somebody that she was investigating. You know, from Lifetime Movie Network, and then the same thing with America's Most Wanted. Now everybody was a suspect type of feeling. That's what it kind of shifted into. And then during that time, that's when their quote unquote supernatural powers started to diminish. They no longer believed in imagination anymore. You know, there was no longer, it was get this bread, you know, just get up out of here. It was no longer uh, the spiritual side of them, you know, it was gone.
Kid, and my sister was 2 before she got into some trouble. My mom always said there was a halo around me, and I always seemed to get out of trouble even when.
So when I say that, I mean, I legitimately should have died at least 10 or 15 times by this point. So, and when my mom said this, she said this after she tried to get the insurance money out of me. I don't really like saying that, but where she tried to get the insurance money out of me. So I realized she said that like she was trying to set me up a couple of times, and somehow I kept walking it out, getting out harmless, you know, without any harm. But yeah, there's just stuff that for many years couldn't explain, man. Like the car accident should have killed me. There's times I should have been hung multiple times. I mean, it's just endless stuff, man. You know, people who try to set me up, and I mean, and somehow, like, I mean, I would get to an inch if I would have walked one more inch in one direction, I would have been shot, or if I would have walked one more inch, I would have been hit by a car or something. You know, just very continuous stuff like that.
And it didn't make sense. At this point,
Continuously.
you know from the previous chapters that I should have died so many times, but somehow I always made it back home. Even my
So I've had even close friends like just try to set me up on stuff just to see if it worked, and it worked, and I would get out of it. Like, and they would admit it to me later, and obviously the friendship ended after that. But it would be like, "Damn, man, you really try to set that up?" He's like, "Man, you keep saying you can't get this and this, that, this," and I'm like, and I said, "Something is, man." I said, "Whatever I'm supposed to do is bigger than me, man."
close friends couldn't explain it. I've had so many unexplained experiences, not all supernatural, but still weird stuff, like vivid dreams that I couldn't remember.
So that's when my spiritual powers start to activate as a skill, not just as proof. It was a weird encounter where I threw some food away, and then I went to sit back down, and the food was right back at my table. You know, the food that I mean, literally, like I grabbed it, picked it up, pulled it, threw it in the trash, and then came back and it was back sitting at the plate. That's when I started having those first encounters where it was just live action type of stuff. Like I didn't see it move. And logically speaking, I could have just forgot to grab it and threw it in the trash, but I don't think that's what happened.
And small things like throwing away food and then finding it back on the table. I started studying Egyptology.
Oh, and as for the dreams, itchy. And as for the dreams, yeah, I can now taste, smell, hear, touch. I was even telling one of my therapists that I had a dream I was in a helicopter and I went upside down in the helicopter and I could feel the pressure of me going upside down. Like, you know, when you flip and the blood starts going to your head.
And a frackin' spiritual science, like Ifa, hoodoo, cabal, alchemy.
So you have to understand that when I denounced Christianity 2010, 2011, I needed to find out what was going on. I needed to find out who I was before this. So I studied everything. I got into it, and I wanted to find out. Um, Now again, I just scratched the surface on most of this stuff, but some of the stuff I met high priests and high priestesses. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but yeah, I met high priestess. Yeah, sorry, and high priestess. So doing all this stuff, I met full time wizards and warlocks and sorcerers. You know, all of the above. Um, and we would have casual conversations about the spirit realm. Casual, not casual conversations about ghosts, casual conversations about spiritual society, or a spirit society or a ghost society.
And dark magic to try to understand what was going on. I wanted to understand the spiritual side and figure out why all these things were happening to me. I knew God existed, but which God did I come from? I spent almost a decade reading a book a week, studying demons, the afterlife, and developing my own philosophy and understanding of the universe. But nothing really happened. I didn't get any proof of an afterlife or anything like.
So I would say 4 years. The first 4 years, nothing, nothing. Like, I mean, just nothing. And I could not put my hand on it. I even went to a witch and was like, "Hey, can you give me a reading?" And she was like, "You're not a warlock. You need to just give this stuff up." Because I'm like, I've been trying for 5 years, and I meditate and all this stuff, and nothing's happening. The first couple of times, it was like you need to eat more healthy and all this stuff. Nothing was happening. And then one day, it it went from left to right.
Bad. I even tried fasting and meditating, but still nothing.
And I always fast. So for the last 10, 15 years, I fast for every zodiac shift. So from the 21st to the 22nd, I would fast, or every full moon. At one point, I was fasting 4 or 5 days a month, not I mean straight, and then one day a week. Now I just fast on the Sabbath.
I just really wanted to know the truth, you know? So, in September 2020, I started working with some real witches and warlocks. Some were just starting out, others were high level. I have a bunch of other titles too, like Grandmaster, Sensei, Dharma Yoga, Zen Master.
So I was so just trying to prove a point that I don't mind being called crazy, but I had enough people around me to evaluate if I was actually going insane, right? So it was like that's why I put that in there, because yeah, I had a Grandmaster Sensei, Dharma yoga teacher, and I'm having these conversations with them, and some of them were more jealous than thinking I was crazy, because you got to even put in perspective. At this point, I wasn't lying anymore. I stopped. I started semen retention. I was not drinking, doing any drugs. Um, wasn't taking any type of medication at all. Completely wasn't drinking soda. Wasn't even drinking juice. Just drinking water only. Um, wasn't drinking any types of sugar. So I mean, when I say clean, I mean clean. I wasn't vegan. I was still eating meat, man. I went vegan for a year and a half, so I didn't. You wouldn't catch me going vegan again, but I was still having at least 50% vegetables in my diet. So it was very healthy, very healthy.
And therapist, I was all of that, but these people were the ones who helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind. I was actually releasing my demons and aligning with my highest self. But listen to me, my goal right here is to shine a light on dark magic and show y'all how to get rid of it. I'm trying to help y'all find some proof that God is real and get ready for when the end comes, because some of us going to be rebuilt.
So so when I tell you I renounced Christianity for a decade, man, I would have laughed in your face at one point if you told me that Jesus was real or the Bible was accurate or anything like that. I would have laughed in your face. I would have called you a coon or Negro peon, you know. So just to give you an idea on some stuff, we would live in Kemet was knowledge is power, you know, and even though we believed in the one true God, we also believed that the one true God made multiple deities that weren't his equivalent, but were in charge of other pieces of God, and then God was responsible, like it was a democracy, so to speak. So that's what Kemet was based off of, or Egyptology was based off of.
Building society in God's image. I always knew God was out there. I've had too many coincidences to doubt it. I just wonder if He's hearing me and if I'm doing right by Him. So
I could not get a response outside of like something very vague or something that you could explain. I didn't have, I didn't start getting inevitable proof for me where the coincidences couldn't be explained anymore, where there was no logical explanation anymore.
keep an open mind around all this stuff. When I started practicing dark
Look, if you think I'm crazy, cool. If you're not sure, cool. But the mind works like a parachute. It only works when it's open, baby.
magic, it took years before I saw anything supernatural that I couldn't explain logically. People would even come up to me and say they dreamt about me being a prophet, sage.
Well, here's the crazy part about that, you know, and I want to say it like but black folks are the most skeptical. So I had black people coming up to me, telling me they had dreams about me, saying that I was a prophet. Um, it's different when white folks say it because it's like, it's just different. Like I'm not trying to get into some racial shit, but it's like when you kind of go, but when another black person says, you're like, oh, because we ain't gonna say that type of stuff unless we mean it. We're not saying it to get something, especially when it comes to spiritual stuff. They would have dreams about me. That really didn't. It's always happened, but it was so rare before, and then it was frequent. Um, it was frequent in the 2020 and 2021.
Or something like that. I always brushed it off, but deep down, I needed to know more. I was living in a hostel at the time and met this lady who told me my future. It was a brief conversation, but it left me shook. At this point, I was in the best physical and mental shape. I started meditating and learning from my Zen master.
So at this point now, uh, so I so when I studied Buddha, when I was studying Buddhism, Buddhism, we would meditate an hour a day, but then I would meditate 2 or 3 hours a day. I take that back. I would meditate 2 hours a day by myself. And then when I met with Ann, I'd meditate with Ann. And then we met on Sundays, the whole little group. And then we'd meditate for 8 hours. And then they would take trips. And then I never went on any of the trips, but they would meditate for 10 hours, 15 hours a day meditation. So to activate that stuff. And then some of my videos, I'll talk about different types of meditation. But there's three main types of meditation: open eye, halfway eye, and fully closed eye. A fully closed eye is a visualization technique. It activates the imagination. A halfway eye, it keeps mind clear, so you're between both worlds, you're between the spiritual world and the actual physical world. And a full eye open, it actually broadens your it opens your peripheral, so you'll see more. It helps you become more of a skilled fighter, and it helps develop your intuition. Anyway, I progress.
Anne, and things started to click. She saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, which was freaky but also kind of
Well, she freaked out. So you have to put in perspective. I'm 39 now, and I was 34, 35 at that time, or 35, 36 at that time when I first met her. And I was the youngest person in that class by about 30 or 40 years. This wasn't, I was and I mean, like the average person was 65 or 70 years old. Um, in that class. So these people were finding their truths at the end of their lives, or at the very minimum, 75% of it was gone. So why was somebody that was, a little over a third of his life coming here doing this stuff? And then I told her I was a singer, and she goes, "Oh, that's why you have a high intuition." And she just said some this all this stuff, and I'm like, I looked at her more like, "How did you know?" versus anything else. But anyway, let's keep it moving.
cool. I trained in Buddhism, meditated for hours each day. My martial arts sensei taught me how to meditate with my eyes open. My yoga instructor taught me how to breathe once a minute, and I was even punching.
So breathing once a minute isn't as difficult or as profound as it sounds. You're learning to. So even from music, you learn to do a hiss for 30 seconds, breathing out, and then you do a slow of a breath going in for 30 seconds. So breathe in for 30 seconds, breathe out for 30 seconds. 1 minute, simple. And that's one breath, right? So you learn to going out, but you just eventually try not to do the hiss when you're doing meditation, but and then you breathe in is extremely slow. You fill up the belly, you fill up the chest, then you try to fill up the lungs, then you fill up everything else, and then you slowly release it. That's it. Simple stuff.
Concrete without breaking my hand. I shared my experiences with these people, and they didn't think I was crazy. In fact, our
And again, like completely casual, which messed me up. Because usually there's a level of trying to convince somebody that the spirit world is real, and trying to convince people that ghosts are real, and all this crazy stuff that nobody really believes in anymore is real. But I'm telling you flat out that witchcraft is real. I'm telling you flat out that ghosts are real. I'm telling you flat out that demons are real. I'm telling you flat out that heaven and hell exist, and it's not some idea of an attitude or something or some dimension, is an actual place.
Conversations became casual and accepted. I felt like I was finally in the know. So, I once saw my senior sensei fight with his eyes
This was the craziest thing that I could say I've ever physically seen in my life. Um, and this was my favorite sensei at this point, and this was the guy I really wanted to learn from. I legitimately, so we have in my dojo, we had this retarded dude, like, and he wasn't, I don't know, something was so wrong with this guy. I hated everything about him. His name was Brett, man. And he couldn't do he couldn't do a proper front punch. He couldn't do a proper front kick. And somehow they kept promoting him. And everybody had to fight him. And everybody had to hold back. And he would blatantly tell everybody that he was the best fighter there, including the people that were training him. Our senseis he would tell our senseis he was a better fighter than him than they were. And I'm like, wow. And anybody else, they would have just kicked out. If it would have been me, they would just kicked out. But because something didn't click with him, they let him stay. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how is this possible? So one of my senseis fight him one day, just sparring, right? And I watch him close his eyes. Holds his breath. He breathes out slowly, and then we go, hey, the fight starts. And for a solid 45 seconds, I watch him have his eyes completely closed. And this dude throws a right punch, right kick, left kick, tries to uppercut, everything. And I'm watching this dude with his eyes completely closed block every one of those punches, block every one of those kicks, and then even watch him stop himself from punching him in response to what he was doing. And that's when I was done. I was like, I gotta learn how to fight from these guys.
closed and was able to block every punch and kick.
And you know what? Even in fact, when I said that to them, they acted like it wasn't a big deal, right? So I was like, oh man, this is what I want to learn. So and then eventually, with years of training, I was able to at least do it sometime, not all the time, but sometimes.
Effortlessly, and it motivated me to train even harder. I was putting in 60 to 80 hours a week for music and martial arts and meditating for
And so let's me being honest, 4 hours a day was maybe once or twice a week. This wasn't every day. Then I did have a couple of weeks where I did do 4 hours a day every day. It was just too much. It was very difficult. Um, Sometimes, especially if you didn't exit properly out of the meditation, it was very difficult to tell if you were still meditating or not, or you were conscious. Like as weird as that sounds, because like the meditation gets so clear, you start thinking that you're doing stuff, and it's like it's hard to tell if you're meditating or you're actually doing it because it's hard to tell between reality and meditation once you get to a certain point.
4 hours a day. It gave me access to the unknown and the unknowns. I wanted to activate my other senses, and boy did I. I learned to recognize
So this is all right. So the Kundalini from yoga is a dark magic, and during this time I was still in African spiritual science, so I didn't know that. But the Kundalini will teach you basic intuitions, and the first thing you learn when you're developing your intuition is when can you guess like what the light is going to be around the next corner, or can you guess what the next person that comes around is going to be by a guy or a girl, or what color is their shirt going to be, and then you try to see it through your third eye, and then once you start to do that, then you start to develop bigger stuff, and then as weird as it sounds, the connection from what I've learned is, and I could be corrected, but the the big toe is directly connected to the third eye. But if you want to activate your third eye, um, There's a few ways to do it. One is turmeric, and you rub it counter clockwise to activate it, and then counterclockwise to deactivate it. Also, you need to look directly up with your eyes and then cross them in towards the third eye, and then that's how you can activate it. Those are the two ways that I learned, and one was from Nomad Winterhawk, was actually taught me that, and then I've done hypnotherapy with quite a few other. And also what's funny is that if you ever go to a hypnotherapist and you talk to them about the good ones, you talk about Ghost Society. They most of them know are fully aware because that's what the subconscious is basically. Spirit is the spirit world, is the subconscious.
My abilities, from telekinesis to telepathy. But I still had
But the first sense, so after the basic five senses, obviously hit, smell, touch, taste, and all that stuff. The next sense you activate is intuition, and then once you activate your intuition, and then you learn the skill set of intuition, then you can start learning to move stuff with your mind. Now, I've only been able to do it twice, right? But what happens is that you just the books I've read and people that have taught me have all confirmed the same thing: is that you just see yourself moving something with your mind, and then eventually it'll move. It'll do just that. Again, methodical, logical.
no control. I was full on hippie mode, rocks, crystals, candles, and yoga. I was doing it all.
Oh man, I was yoga pants pimping, baby. I mean, I was even taking showers and not putting deodorant on. Like I was, I was with it. Yeah, yeah. I was going to yoga at least 6 days a week on the Bluff. They have free classes in Long Beach at 11 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So I would go to either one of those.
And then I started seeing things. My peripheral vision increased dramatically, and I started hearing colors and seeing thoughts.
So when you start to mix, like your ears start to taste, your tongue starts to hear, your eyes start to feel, and like they all get quiet, they all mix. Is when you start elevating, right? And not in a bad way, like they're confused, but in a way where you can taste somebody's words. As weird as it sounds, like you can taste somebody's words. It's like you can taste what somebody's thinking. Is what you start to do, and then you can see what somebody's hearing. Like it's weird. Like you'll start doing that kind of activation.
I even figured out how to move stuff with my mind. It started with fire, then things would
So
move on.
again, that's very. I started very small with candles. I would move my head left. The fire would move left. I would move my head right. The fire would move right. And again, I would move it and stay moved, and it would stay moved. It wouldn't be going like that. I wouldn't go like that to try to see if it mimicked me. I would go left, and then it would go left, and I would go right. It would go right. And sometimes it was, and it happened very, very, very lightly. I wasn't, and that's the thing of me even expressing this is I had no control over it. It would do it every now and again. It wouldn't do it when I wanted it to.
Their own. I was all about respecting nature, too, always asking permission before I went to the park and giving thanks to my
I stand by the fact of if you want to see the light side of the supernatural world, give 100 thank yous a day for 2 months and see what happens. And sincere 100 thank yous a day, and you'd be surprised how hard it is to say thank you 100 times a day.
surroundings. And after yoga class, I would meditate and see the 1,000 leaf lotus flower.
I would watch it go clockwise, but that was just with open eye meditation. And with open eye meditation, you're supposed to focus on something, and the first thing you want to focus on is you want to become what you're looking at. So I would find a leaf in the grass, and then I would start looking through the molecules of it, and then I would start to, obviously, you look at something long enough, it starts to your pupils. I guess your pupils start to dilate, so you start to see it more, and then the next thing you know, it's like it's right in your face, even though it's like 5 or 6 feet away from you, and then you start to become that thing, and you see why it moves the way it moves and thinks the way it thinks, and all that stuff. You have to see nature as if it thinks for itself and believes in itself, right? So, and once you start doing that, then you can start connecting with things on a different level, because now not only is it's acknowledging that you're there, but you're also acknowledging that it can work for you if you wanted to.
It was like everything just moved out of my way respectfully, not in fear.
That I can tell you, like the weirdest part, like I mean, California, you really don't have that type of stuff mess with you, like bugs and stuff like that. But I mean, it was like the trees would move out the way if it saw me walking. Like it was just weird stuff. It was just the stuff that you just like the trees would get out the way. The dogs would stand over and move to the side without the owner having to move them and stuff like that. Just stuff like that.
That's when I knew I wasn't alone. I couldn't control my ability, but I knew it was real. It wasn't something I just made up anymore. I was hoping I was wrong or crazy, but people would tell me, that didn't happen to me until I was. Or it's good you're
Yeah, that was like they were preparing me for stuff. Well, you're going to see some crazy stuff tonight. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm like, and look, and all of us
seeing this now. I was training with my sensei and grandmaster almost every day. But then, the senior belt instructor in our group lost all respect for me.
I think he was jealous. Um, I do. Because he was really mad at me for not pressing charges on the guy that pulled a knife on me. And that's when he lost respect, but he also wanted me to lie for him, and I wasn't willing to do that. And again, it wasn't like big lies. It was just very small lies. Like he didn't know a person's name, and I would introduce myself, and I forgot to ask the guy's name. It's just small stuff, man. And he had no forgiveness for me. I had no room for error with him, and it was like everybody else had so much room for error, and I had none. But he saw how much of a good fighter I was becoming, and and my grandmaster trained him, and they were really close for 25, 30 years. And here I come in 2 years in, and and me and we're a little triplet, it was me, my grandmaster, and my sensei, and we would go to the park 3, 4 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week, train, and he would, and we wouldn't invite him because he's a lawyer and he couldn't come, you know. So that was that.
Tried to make things right, but he didn't want anything to do with me.
When I say nothing to do with me, nothing to do with me. I probably, and he was my closest sensei at that point. So at one point, I could call him. It wouldn't even be a hesitation for him to call me back. And then I remember eventually I called him 67 times. 67 times he didn't return my phone call.
He even wanted me to press charges against my crazy roommate for pulling a knife on me before, but my sensei didn't agree with that. Then, I found out.
So in total, I had 19 senseis. One senior sensei, one grandmaster, and 19 black belts. Well, I'm sorry, 19 black belts, 9 senseis, and all of these people I had to answer to.
Out that another sensei who I thought was a super kind guy actually hated my guts. These people ended up becoming the biggest enemy I've ever faced. Because they were strong, but
So the reason that they were my biggest enemy, it wasn't just because of what they did to me. And it wasn't just how they mistreated me. It was that they never gave me anything to get angry about. Because normally, for a person to be motivated to distance themselves from somebody, they have to have something, they have to have some type of ammunition to walk away. If I'm married and my wife cheats on me, I gotta leave. I have the power and the fuel to leave. They gave me nothing. I just knew something was wrong and I could not figure it out. And that's why they were the greatest enemy, because they were very indirect and they were very weaselly. That's why it was such a that's why they were the greatest enemy I had. It's not because of what they did. They were terrible people to me by at the end of it for sure. But I think that was just from being sheep their whole lives. Um, but that was the hard part, was realizing that they had bad intentions and I couldn't prove that they had bad intentions. Everything that they did was indirect.
because they were sneaky in my weaknesses. I trusted them completely and they were like family to me, but then I realized they didn't support my dream of starting.
And you would think that they would be supportive. They pretended to be supportive at first, and if they were supportive at first, they were supportive at first. I'm not taking that away from them. But it eventually, when I was starting to make traction, It was they needed to chop down that tree, and and I had to tell them many times. I said, "You only have my respect to as far as I give it to you." And I mean, I didn't say it that ugly, but it was like you need to understand that your opinion only matters to as much as I give it to. And they didn't understand that. They thought that their word was bond and gold with me, but they for me they were like family because we would. I mean, man, shoot, man, we would take the kids to Chuck E. Cheese. And we would go paintballing, and we would go to the gun range, and I had all this stuff. I never had anybody to do that stuff with, you know. So it was great to be able to do that. You know, I didn't want to lose them. I really didn't. But here we are.
My own business and pursuing music. So, I teamed up with Tommy, the spineless sensei, and I put everything into starting my business and
He was the biggest snake that I've ever met, and the kindest snake that you ever meet. That's the hard part. Is this spineless man, terrible person, terrible person. And I truly believe any person that hasn't pursued their dreams is going to sabotage yours. I truly believe that, and that's thanks to him. And I mean that in a good way, because part of you believes that you can take people with you on your journey. And I've learned the hard way that you have to do this alone, and whoever you're going to meet is already waiting for you, not the other way around. You can't bring people from your past to your future.
making my dreams come true. But that wasn't easy either. Tommy did absolutely nothing to help. I worked 20-hour days and built up all these websites and social media accounts to promote our businesses and to make money. I used this as a distraction because being vulnerable is hard for any musician, let alone someone that has gone through.
And I will say in his favor that I was doing other business ventures other than pursuing music because I didn't think I could make it. And I think that was in the back of my mind. And I'll tell you that the hard part for me was even people told me not to talk about my story until I made it. And that's why I'm talking about it now instead of later, because you might not hear it later. I might not get to where I'm trying to go to, right? I might not have all the followers and all that stuff. So somebody needs to hear this before it's too late, you know. And if I'm right about what I think I'm right about, then we don't have much time. But if I'm wrong, I'm crazy, and I can just make music, and then maybe go back and just be the best version of myself that I can be. But it's a win-win for me.
Through what I have. I was burned out, tired, jaded, and he just sat there. I thought he was afraid of
This is what you would call army fatigue. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to sing anymore. Not because I didn't like singing, but because I had been betrayed and sabotaged so many times, including sabotaging myself so many times, that I'm just done. And I just broke out of that 6, 7 months ago. Like, if I'm being honest,
failing. But after spending $25,000, I realized
he was willing to spend his own money to watch me fail. And I saw that it was a win-win for him if that worked, because now not only was I a coward and a thief if I didn't make it, but it's like now if I don't make it and pay him the money back I owe him, I am exactly what they say I am. So it's like that, and I'm grateful that he did it, because he told me that he doesn't belong with me, not long term. But I adored them, man. I loved them to death. It broke my heart for them to even make it seem like I was trying to steal something from them, and I cussed them out. I really cussed them out. Like, they really like, you think I came here for 10 G's, man? Come on, man.
he actually wanted me to fail. Oh, and I forgot to mention, anytime I would talk about killing myself,
Yeah. I played poker, even professionally, for many years now. Not amateur more than professional, but I played for many, many years back in the Midwest, and you learn to read people really well. Whenever I did talk about killing myself, it was like it was a part of his grand scheme. Even one day, he told me it was okay to go back home, and I never had to pay him back his money that I owed him, because that was his goal, was for me to quit.
Tommy would actually micro smile. I know, messed up, right? But at the time, I just brushed it off because I trusted him with my life.
When people show you who they are, believe them, is what you learn from this. When people show you who they are, believe them. Don't give them the excuse of whatever you think it's for. And that's so hard to do.
It was my shoulder to cry on, and I was so afraid to be alone. I left everything I ever
He was the, that was a, and I can tell you officially that that's the last person that I have as a friend, foe, or anything else. I don't have anybody. And this is the freest I've ever been. I have God with me. That's all I need now. You know.
knew 10 years ago and burned every single bridge. He was my last friend, and now he's become my biggest regret and enemy. He played the long game and used my love for him against me.
I adored him, man. I adored him. Uh, they wouldn't. I adored him, man. It was heartbreaking to walk away from him. Heartbreaking. You know. It, the only thing wasn't there was the romantic factor of it. It was the love was. I legitimately thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with those people. I thought I was going to go to war with them. You know. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. I had imagined them being my best man and my wedding man. No, it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking.
It was the ultimate betrayal. He set a trap and was just waiting for his chance to attack me. And when I begged him for help, he finally revealed his true colors and suggested that I just give up and go back home. It was like he was planning my failure this whole time. I was so angry, I almost spit in his face. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Do you really think I'm here to prove something to some old washed man who never even went after his dreams, let alone tried anything?"
And that's what I flat out. He and I told so I sold my car for my business. I got another car now, of course, but I sold my car to put the money into my business, and I helped him get approved for like $35,000 in credit cards. So we used the credit cards, not all of it, but a good portion of it, to get the business up and running. We never were able to get it past a certain point because he wasn't willing to cross the line. He put the small money in, but when it was time to put the big money in, he turned it down. And I had to drive Uber, and he would let me drive his car while he was at work to make money. And then this is what happened one day, where he says, you know, you can go home if you want to, and you don't have to worry about the money you owe me. And I said, "But you think I came here to drive a Kia Sorento, a 2016 Kia Sorento, to help a washed up old man that doesn't even that's given up on his dreams, you know, because he wanted to be an actor, but he never he went to one audition 30 years ago and he didn't get it, and he never tried again."
It was like he was trying to bring me down and crush my spirit, but I wasn't going to let him. He was a weasel snake and the greatest enemy I've ever faced because I had nothing to attack. He wasn't being unreasonable,
I had
triggering.
nothing to attack. He wasn't unreasonable. He wasn't triggering. He wasn't confrontational. He didn't get loud. I never heard him cuss. I never even heard him say the N word. But when he showed me, and I knew I was no longer worthy of being
Or confrontational, he was just being sneaky and manipulative. I had to figure out his intentions, and it was like he had set up a perfect trap and was just waiting for his chance to attack. He was a weasel snake.
there. And that was his attack. He was waiting for me to get so low mentally that my mindset was gone to where he could make it oblivious. And I remember writing a letter and telling him, you don't never trust the quiet ones, because he was the quiet one, you know. Yeah, but I miss him, man. I do, and I'm also I'm glad to be alive, because they would have killed they almost killed my spirit, and this was the first time that my spirit has almost been killed by somebody. This is the first time I've actually been broken by somebody, you know. Uh, because even with my mom, it was more of a bend than a break. This was a break because you this was never expected, you know. And then you know, there's a silent admittance, like he admitted it silently that he wanted me to fail, you know.
always slithering around and trying to take me down. So, back in September 2020, I decided to make an ancestor shrine and things got real crazy real from there. I would pray and sometimes see
So this, when I told you for years I would do all of these different things and all of this stuff before, and no spiritual activation would come and I wouldn't see anything and all this stuff. The one thing I didn't do was use fire, and the other thing I didn't do was give a spiritual sacrifice. So I made an ancestry altar with food, with water, with candles, and I tell you, within a week, I was seeing ghosts. I was seeing spirits within a week after I learned the ancestral altar, after I put the ancestral altar up. So if you're looking to see the supernatural side of things, that's how you activate it. Is you make yourself an altar. And there's a book called Honoring Your Ancestors. And that is like the beginner's manual for witchcraft. Is where that's where it was activated after that. And I went, I had my crystals, I had my rocks. I mean, I had $400 worth of rocks, man. I'm telling you, you could like dead
these
ass.
little sprites like 1 to 4 times a day. I know, sounds weird as hell, right? But I also
At first, I was getting haunted, and then I would have angels come and speak to me. I mean, I literally would have people or spirits grab me by the shoulder while I was sleeping and wake me up. That happened all the time, all the time. I would, as crazy as it sounds, man, my bed would levitate. My bed levitated 2 or 3 times. And all this stuff always happened right before I was about to wake up. This didn't happen when I was deep in sleep. This was during that 5 minutes of me being right before I would wake up, and it would happen right before I went to sleep, like that, like right during that time frame.
heard trumpets and saw things moving around. At first, I thought I was losing my damn mind, but then other people started seeing it too.
So I would be haunted even when I was driving Uber, right? Um, and then this girl got in the car and she saw she saw she saw my card, my phone holder literally lift up and fly across the car, the car, and she was like, "Oh my god, what the fuck? Oh my god!" I was like, "Oh, you saw that?" She was like, "Yeah, oh my god." I was like, "Oh, I'm glad you saw it because I see this stuff. It happens all the time to me, but nobody else tends to see it." She's like, "That's crazy." But yeah, it was a Asian lady. Age she couldn't have been older than 24.
It's like, if you're gonna mess around with this stuff, you gotta understand that fear and faith are like the currencies of the spirit world.
That's crucial. Your soul is a spiritual bank account, and fear and gratitude are the two currencies. Fear is obviously demonic, and gratitude or faith. Faith meaning gratitude meaning the being thankful for something that hasn't happened yet, right? Or being thankful for something that has happened. But faith is being thankful for something that hasn't happened yet. So these are the currencies that you use, and you can take and you add to that by being grateful, and you subtract from that by being ungrateful and sinning, right? That's just basically how it is. And people don't understand that your currency, you don't sell your soul, you're selling your soul. Soul as a plural. Every time you do something, you sell a percentage of your soul, whether it's a small percentage or a large percentage, right? Um, some things are bigger than others, but lying is just as bad as killing if you look at it in a certain way. Excuse me.
I'm not saying you should do it, but if you want to see the truth, I'll show you. Just remember that you have to decide what to fear and how to fear it.
So the stuff I'm going to talk to you about is, if you want to see the dark side and go into this stuff, then I can show you what you need to do. It starts with that book, and it starts with learning to meditate. Um, But you have to understand once these uh, spirits are activated, it's very difficult to deactivate them. Um, but the biggest thing is that they run on fear. If you think they can kill you, then they can. If you think they can't kill you, then they can't. That's how it works. Fear, as in false evidence appearing real, right? They think if you think they can, they can. If you think they can't, they can't. That's how it works. Simple.
You could lose your mind, I almost did. But anyways, back to my story. So, for years, I couldn't remember my dreams until I met with a hypnotherapist who did this thing called a mirror meditation.
So Jesse was out of his mind. Um, but we would I would put my feet in salt water in a the little foot spa where the water would bubble, and I would put salt water in there, the Epsom salt, and I would meditate in the mirror. Um, the one thing about meditation, if you do open eye meditation, you have to find a spot and you can't move. Every time you move, you start all over again. So you can't move not even a tenth of an inch, even with your eyes. You try not to move at all, and then you'll start to see stuff.
Basically, you put your feet in salt water and stare at your third eye in the mirror for 30 minutes while listening to hypnotic music. After the first few times, I started seeing shadows come from my body. And after a month of that, I started using my ancestral altar and my dreams went from 0 to 100. I was having like 1,000 dreams a night, dreaming about
So I would go into different people's bodies every night. Sometimes it was like quantum leap, man. Um, yeah, it was like quantum leap, man. I would go from one body to the next body to the next body to the next body, and then by the time I was done, it would feel like I had 1,000 dreams a night. Um, most of the time I couldn't remember them, but it was like it was like it was like this long. I had a dream of a long montage some nights, like you know what I mean. Like it's just weird.
people I never met before and experiencing all my senses in the dreams. It was wild, man. But then the hauntings started to get worse. My bed would shake and levitate off the ground and I always felt like something was in my room.
Yeah. Um, and you can look at. I'm 100% fine with saying, "Hey, man, this sounded like this guy was hallucinating." It is what it is, man. I'm just telling you my experience.
Even when it wasn't. I started calling on my ancestors and multiple deities for help and they actually started answering me. I'd ask questions and get an answer via osmosis if my mind.
It was if there was two ways it would happen. Like I mean, it would be literally like an acorn falling off of a tree, and then I would get the answer I was asking for. Or somebody would say, "You know what? You should read this book," and then I'd read this book and I get this answer that I've been asking for 5 or 10 years, and I couldn't figure it out on my own.
Was clear. I
So when you start to get clarity, yes, you do get information from God directly, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, via osmosis. You don't need to try to figure it out; they'll give it to you,
know it sounds
good or bad.
crazy, but trust me, it happened. I wouldn't hear
And I'll be honest, I don't care if you trust me. I'm just telling you my experience. If you want to believe me, believe me. If you don't, don't. Simple.
voices, but I'd hear a different voice when I talked to myself. Like a different narrator. At this point, I still hadn't read the Bible in like 10 years and was fully studying the dark arts. I would have laughed in your face if you told me the Son of God was real. Until one day, September 13th, 2020, I got a visit from a spirit claiming to be Jesus.
So I don't think it was September 13th. I think it was the 20th and the 21st, because that was when I dry fasted for the first time. Um, that was the first time that I didn't drink water or eat food for a couple of days. Actually, I take that back. It was 24 hours. And mind you, I fasted probably 500 times at that point, you know. So it wasn't like it wasn't, but that was the first time I dry fasted. And I had, and I didn't just meet Jesus. I went to a different realm. Yeah, I was driving down I-5 going south in Burbank, and I had a full 15-minute conversation with the Son of God, but it was only a split second that it passed from in this realm. And the reason I even remember that is because I was driving towards a bridge, and then when I went from that bridge back up and then came back down, I just passed under it. Like I could, the little shadow when you pass under a bridge. So as crazy as it sounds, man.
While driving down the highway. We talked for like 15 minutes, and then I was back on the highway, only a second had actually passed. It was crazy, man. I talked to my therapist about it, and he said it wasn't schizophrenic or a hallucination.
Yeah, I mean, it for 2 years. I still didn't read the Bible after that. I was just thinking I was just fucking psycho. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah, I'm just fucking psycho, bro. Like, there's no way. Because I would have laughed in your face, man, flat out. Um, flat out.
My sensei was a Christian, and he didn't believe me, but he kind of
I scared him. I scared him, and he considered himself pure, but he lied more than anybody I ever known. You know, but he lied because he cared so much about people. But yeah, I think he believed me. I just don't think he was willing to admit it. But after that point, I stored maybe 400 pounds of rice, 500 pounds of beans, and had all kind of stuff to clear water and all that stuff. And I was preparing for a famine before I even knew anybody even talked about a famine. Yeah, we were preparing for it, and that was 3 or 4 years ago.
did. It took me another year to figure it all out, but I realized that I was worshiping the devil and all these haunting and superpowers came.
So I realized that all the activations I got didn't come from God. I wasn't sinning very much, but I still wasn't with the one true God. So I knew it had to come. So I knew that if it didn't come from me, it came. If it didn't come from God, it came from the devil. There's no in between. It doesn't come from you. It comes through you.
From a dark source. It was like spaghetti and meatballs, you know? And that the Bible was true. I gave all my stuff away and burned everything else.
I had 220 books, gave them all away. I wouldn't sell them because I didn't want the money for it because I knew the money was evil too. So, and I don't think money is evil, but I think that the money I would have gotten from it was evil. So I gave those books away. I burned all of my keepsakes, like my baby pictures, anything that had anything to do with the devil. I burned them. I gave all my clothes away. I even gave all the food away that I had in the storage. I don't want any of it. I gave it back to where it came from.
The haunting stopped, the spirits left, but the visions and
I would yeah, there was no more. No, I wasn't being pulled out of my bed on the floor anymore. I wasn't. The bed wasn't shaking and jumping in the air anymore. Um, Plates weren't being thrown across the room anymore. Um, I wasn't having. I wasn't getting beat up by devils in my dreams. I wasn't dreaming of nothing. Like I would dream of nothing sometimes. Um, but the vision still stayed. I would Now the dreams got bigger, and then I got sick, like badly. I had an allergic reaction right after I burned this stuff, and I mean a bad allergic reaction. Um, 85 to 90% of my body had webs on it for 6 months, and that's really a lot where the weight gain came from. I had no energy left. I had webs from the right side of my face all the way down to the only place I didn't have webs on my body was my shins and sometimes my forearm, the outside of my forearms. That was the only place I didn't have webs on my body. I even had webs on my genitals, man. Yeah, it was a bad allergic reaction, man. And I have another um, video that's coming out that it talks about some of the deities that I was praying to, and I got exactly. And there are certain deities that you pray to, you'll get almost instant responses from. Some of them you have to be black only to do, but in later videos I'll show you what you need to do if you want to see some of the stuff that I saw.
premonition stayed. God gave me proof, man. I learned that if it doesn't come from him, it comes from the devil. So, I started focusing on being as pure as possible. No booze, no XXX websites, no manual job. If you know what I am.
The biggest key is not trying to sin on purpose. You're going to sin no matter what you do. It's just trying not to sin on purpose. Um, it's to be as pure as you can, be as honest as you can, which does not mean you have to volunteer your honesty, but being as honest as you can, but not volunteering your honesty. You don't need to walk around telling people everything you think of them. But when they come your way, you do your best to stay in a narrow path. Simple.
Saying, and trying not to sin on purpose. And it worked. God started talking to me, and I knew that everything I had before came from lies and manipulation. So, I stopped lying and manipulating people and just focused on my music and God. So, I gotta tell you guys, something crazy happened to me. I stopped hiding from the mystery of the world and started learning about the personality of God and the anguish of God.
So that's the if you want God to talk to you, you have to understand the anguish of God. That's the hard part. Is just think about all of the stuff that God has to watch that's happening to people, and it has to make him very sad too. Can't be happy about seeing this stuff.
God. And you know what? My understanding of everything started to increase. It was like I could see God's plan unfolding right before my eyes. I knew I had to share my whole story, even the stuff that I was super embarrassed about.
And I'll be honest with you, I had no interest in sharing any of this stuff with anybody else until 6 months ago. I would have taken this stuff to the grave, including the stuff about my mom and the other stuff that I talk about later in this series. I would have died with it, you know, easy. Would have rather died with it, but that's not. It's bigger than me, and I'm a big guy.
I still don't know what my role is in this whole plan. Maybe I'm a prophet, maybe not. But what I do know for sure is that God and the devil exist, and heaven and hell are actual places. It's not just some feeling or something we made up.
It's not something that people just make up. And God just reveals snippets because if God would have told me this part 2 years ago, I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have. Hell no. I don't want y'all knowing about me like that. I don't have to go through all the stuff that I went through 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't want to reopen these wounds. I wouldn't have done this on my own accord. You know, plain and simple.
And we're all being tested, man. Some of us more than others.
That's it.